We can do that. New Year, Marco, and I wore specifically just for you, not just my New Year's suit, but my scale mail because we're going to talk about some D&D today.
Oh my god, I love it.
Just for
You got
you.
the scale mail. Scale mail is also like one of the worst armors you could wear.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It kind of
I guess.
matches because I
Yeah.
die all the time.
That's funny. I go through phases of where I'm excellent. Like my builds are great. I don't die. I pat myself on the back for just how good I'm doing, and then I go through these really sloppy phases of crazy builds. Some of them. I haven't told you all of them. That's for sure.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to tell everybody all of them because they're so stupid. Some of them. But
Yeah.
let's start. So I think that's a good place to start is like crazy builds because that's one of the most fun things. That is actually the most fun thing to do in DDO.
Yeah.
As far as I'm
Like
concerned.
there's that one time you came up with that one build of playing a hand wrap barbarian that's
Yeah.
wisdom based.
No, it's worse than that. You might forgive me if I was a brawler barb, but I was a brawler fighter. So I went wisdom base hand wrap fighter. I didn't take and that into 20. I didn't even take a level of monk to get like a proper, um, like
Get your stances or anything.
unarmed damage. Yeah, or nothing. Like so it was an interesting experiment because by end game when I decided to take him into raids. And I told nobody what I was. I just, they just saw fighter, and I kept his HP fairly low on purpose, so no one would think I was a tank.
Uh-huh.
And I went into raids thinking my DPS would be all right. It wasn't. It was just barely moderate, let's say, for like normal to elite play. But what I ended up doing was because back then you could use anyone could take the I'm forgetting the name of spells and feats now. The one that turns everything into a frog.
Oh, frogging, yeah.
Yeah, what's the name of that
Mass
spell
frog.
though? Mass Frog, duh. All right, so Mass Frog. I took Mass Frog as an epic feat, and because of my high wisdom, I was able to run around and just Mass Frog everything as a fighter in raids on Elite, dude. Like
I never thought of
because of
that.
my past lives, I had the DC for it, and I was in one. Okay, so I think the most epic moment with that build was when I did what's the raid with the two dragons on the mountain?
um,
Fire Peak or something, Thunder Peak.
yeah, Fire on Thunder Peak. Fire on Thunder
There you
Peak.
go. Fire on Thunder Peak. So I'm in Fire on Thunder Peak in a pug on Elite. Now that one's actually pretty rough for a pug to do. Lots of new players, people, you don't know what the synergy's like.
Oh
So
yeah.
I ran around that entire time resurrecting with scrolls and mass frogging. That's all I did. I saved that entire run just by resurrecting with scrolls. I used over 20 res scrolls just in like the last like 20% of that raid. I was
Yeah,
against that.
when I started, I absolutely sucked at the game. So I learned by like my fourth or fifth life when I played cleric for the first time. I'm like, I definitely need to make sure I can heal people and I can use raised scrolls, and that was kind of like my saving grace. Um, and I completely missed the bandwagon on Mass Frog until like the last year. I didn't know that it was a good ability until like I saw someone use it. I think it might have been Storm Mage or Quenya, just running around frogging everything. And so eventually I just kind of like became like designated healer for everybody and Razor.
That's what and DDO is one of the most difficult games to play a healer in. I
Yeah.
feel they've made it way easier. I have such high respect thinking back to the early days of DDO when we would do difficult dungeons or even those first raids where we had people who were main healers in our group. What they had to go through was insane. I mean, they had to be on the QT in the moment, on top of it. They could not miss a beat. There was one player, I don't remember his name. He was in the Burning Hand, our guild, or my guild that I joined and eventually took over. Um, and he played back in the day. They had what was called the Batman build, which was Paladin, Rogue, and I'm trying to think if it had Fighter. It had one splash of something else, but it was called the Batman build because it just had tons of utility. So it's basically just a wand monkey rogue like hybrid. That guy healed. He healed us through the veil. Um, I can't remember the names of anything right now. What is going on? Um, the Shroud, I mean, the Shroud raid. He healed us through that, even up to the Sulamatis fight. He
Okay.
healed through that with scrolls, and this is like 2000, like 2008. It
Uh-huh.
was really, really impressive. I don't
Yeah.
think I can't think of anyone now that could do that. What he could do then.
Yeah,
So
no,
it was pretty amazing.
the only utility build that comes to mind, this was like, so I didn't start playing until 2016. I made an account in 2014, and I was pretty dormant until like summer 2016. That's when I decided I was actually going to play the game.
Mm,
Um, and so what happened was I kept running into this guy, Cow's Rule, who he was 18 sorcerer, 2 artificer, and he was Blade Forge. And he just like somehow had everything all the time. Like he had only like he only invested in like crowd control spells. He could tank. He had like skills for everything. He had his rune arm. He had his crossbow, and yeah, like that was like a Batman build. And I decided I'm like I want to be able to do that, and
yeah.
so I stupidly tried to make everything like favored soul or cleric with rogue in it or artificer, and
Yeah.
that went shit. That was one of those things where
Yeah,
it's like,
you're
yep,
spreading
that
your
went
stats
tits
pretty
up.
thin there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I went through a fit when I first started doing the TR runs. When I first started TRing my Manox, my main character, that was like. Every build had 2 rogue in it, just to trap, because I was um that was kind of like a like DDL is doing all right now. It's pretty active, but back then it was in a real slump for whatever reason. So it was
Mhm.
real. I mean, there was no. I thought the game was dying. There was nobody like to group with, and this is on Sarlono, which is like a really popular server. So every build had 2 rogue in it, just so I could solo through every quest. Um, but that was kind of cool too, because that's how I learned like most of the game, doing that, how to solo a lot of dungeons. And I'm not. I used to be like the fire goddesses and the Gordles, and just trying to be like an expert at the dungeon and run through them really fast. And eventually it felt like such a job. It wasn't fun anymore. And it's funny to say, but I enjoyed the game again when I got sloppy, when I just,
Yeah.
got lazy with things.
Yeah,
So,
I've gotten really lazy as well lately. So like the Tabaxi came out, the new cat race, and um, normally like it take me like a couple of weeks now, like 2 to 3 weeks to get through life. And instead, it's taken me like 5 months, and I've gotten through
oh
the
yeah,
iconics. Um, and I got like so stupidly lazy during that time. And so now I'm back to my normal, like just playing a wizard for now. Cause that's all
yeah.
cause it's just like, I don't really have to care too much.
Is
Until,
that your comfort zone? Is wizard like your
yeah,
class
yeah.
that you can fall
Wizard's
into?
my comfort zone. Wizard and cleric. Those are my 2 comfort zones.
Yeah, cleric
Just
is
because it's
great.
like, yeah, because if I'm cleric, I can just hide behind the group and just like spam heal spells all the time. Or like if someone dies, I can just go, oh, blame it on lag, and then just raise them and just keep healing, go back to healing. Um, but wizard, like I can just run everything by myself and be
There
really
was a guy.
lazy. Yeah.
There was a guy. So I'm jumping around on you, but like going off of that, there was a guy. Okay, so there is a player on Sarlona named Vanna White, right?
Oh yeah,
But
Van is great. I like him.
yeah, he is. But there was another Vanna White like 10 plus years ago, and he was in the Burning Hand.
Hmm.
And the guy was he's accidental comic relief for us, because he had this thing where I don't know if he was like autistic on the spectrum or what, but he would explain things to death. I mean, he could kill you with the explanation of anything. You could ask him like, who invented the napkin? Like, where did the napkin come from? And this guy just had this. He just knew the answers. Like, he was just like the Rain Man. Like, he had an answer for everything, but he wouldn't shut up. He didn't know when to stop talking.
He'd just go
So
on for
like
an hour.
he'd go on forever, and he was a really so he was an all he eventually played. I convinced him to roll a cleric because when he first joined our guild, he was like a paladin melee, and he was terrible. He's like the worst melee player I think I've ever seen in DDO. And I was playing a cleric back then. This is before the days of Mana, 'cause that's how far back this goes. And I was making him look good by killing things in front of him. So like I would watch him as he ran around, and I would cast on in his area to make. And but unfortunately, it started as a joke, but then it eventually convinced him. He convinced himself that he was an awesome melee because he just his brain wasn't picking up on the little skulls next to the damage. He never saw him, I'm sure, but he just thought he was killing everything around his character. So that became like a joke, but that guy was such. You made me think of that. I don't know. I hope he's doing all right. That guy was hilarious.
Oh my god, that's so funny. That's when I started. That just reminds me of like when I started playing with Gordle, because I was like, just because I healed, and
Yeah.
Gordle could kill everything. So he's just like, "All right, Steve, I'm just gonna heal you." I mean, no, he's like, "All right, Steve, just heal me." And so my
Mhm.
job was like to try and keep up with this guy who can move at like faster than a level 20 monk speed. And I'm like
Yeah.
trying to catch up with him and like just spam him like heal, 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 god damn it, heal. Um and he's like always talking in like a chipper voice to me, and he's like talking really fast too. Like at first I'm like, this guy must be like on amphetamines or something. And he's like, all right, Steve, this is great, great, great. Keep healing me. Keep healing me. He's like, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. Just keep healing me. Come on. And so, like, I'm trying to, like, keep up with him, like, through this dungeon. And I'm just like, no, come on, buddy. And then he dies. And this was, like, the early days of Reaper. So, like, people were, like, just, like, toying around with, like, the high Reaper skulls. And
Yeah.
he
Yeah. Reaper
dies.
was rough in the early days. Yeah.
Yeah, and he had balls. He would like just put up like an LFM and then just like run in on like some quest on like R10. And like while people are just like starting to pug in on the LFM, like I think like 3 or 4 people joined like as he died. Like this was one of my first times I ran with him on like Reaper 10 or something. And as he dies, he just puts in like he just types in like a broken heart, and there's just like three,
So you let him down.
three or
You
four
let me
people
die, Steve.
join in, and they're like, "Ah, Steve, you totally forgot to do your job. You failed him."
Let's talk about Reaper for a minute here.
Yeah.
It's kind of controversial to me. I'm sure it is for a lot of players. I never liked it when it was introduced, and I'm someone who loves high difficulty. I'm that guy that the first time I play any game, I always played on the absolute toughest difficulty. It's like it's just an ego challenge for me. I have to do
Yeah.
it. I have to learn this game, so I like it. But
You should
um,
download the Baldur's Gate Enhanced and play the Throne of the Legacy of Baal difficulty.
well, I'm actually playing right now. A friend of mine for Christmas bought me Pathfinder: Wrath of the Righteous.
Hmm.
And I've never played a Pathfinder game, but it's very obviously similar to 3.5, and
Hmm.
it's incredibly difficult. But that's my point is that or the point I want to make rather is that a lot of these games they're difficult from the start. And DDO technically is. I mean, before the days of TRing, before our mains become these overpowered gods, like, that's why I like hardcore, for example. It brings back to life a lot of things that don't matter anymore on a main server. You know what I
Oh
mean? Like
yeah.
a lot of skill checks, a lot of HP checks, DPS checks. They just don't matter anymore on your main character, right? So, but with Reaper, I think it's lazy and I still think it's a lazy and arbitrary like
Yeah.
layer, like you know what I mean, like a layer over what the game is of what's so interesting about DDO, and it still does, I think, create kind of a division in the community, and it's a bit of a turnoff, I think, to a lot of players. What do you think? I mean, do you feel the
I
same way,
think
or
I think so for a couple of reasons. I think it really I think it started in the early days of Reaper. So like when I started playing, like everyone stuck together, everyone had a role. People actually thought about different builds. Like all right, well, I'm gonna play a damage character, and then like I'm gonna kind of like add in the LFM. Like maybe I should have like a tank in here or a rogue.
Hmm.
And so like people thought about like traps, and people want like people always did optionals. Everybody always did the optionals because that's how you got the most XP. Um, but the problem that started with Reaper was that at the beginning it wasn't like now where it's like, oh, you just get 20% more XP. It was like if you have like 5 skulls on, now you get like 5 times the XP, or you get like an extra 5% bonus per skull or something like that. I remember it was like something really crazy. And so like if you knew which quests to run, you could put it on like you could put it on like a really high Reaper, like really high amount of skulls, run it, and then like you
Right.
could get the XP to basically like skip a level.
Right. Yeah.
Um, but that became like an incentive. So
Sure.
then it was like, how quickly can you get through this one quest on like Reaper 9 or Reaper 10? And then like people really started toying with trying to figure out like exploits, designer flaws,
Hmm.
what's the best way to shortcut. And I think that was like that's the part where like people started to like not play as much, or some people were like, oh, it's just about getting through this as fast as possible. um,
Yeah.
where before, like, I would run into people who um, and then somehow that created that culture shift where everything's like, ah, just get all your lives, get all your Reaper points. It's all about the maximum everything.
Hmm.
Because beforehand, like I would run into people that would have like 5 or 6 characters, and on their main character, they still wouldn't even have like even heroic completionists before like racials got introduced, and these like extra epic lives and all of that. um, so I think like to me personally, like the problem that was sort of like the beginning of it was the problem. I don't. It's which like unfortunately like what we got right now is sort of like the end end of the cataclysm.
Yeah. I agree with what you said too. It makes me to add to that. I think another problem I have with Reaper, maybe one of the main problems I have with Reaper is that it. You kind of talked about it. It breaks up the group um, architect, right? So and especially in Reaper, where you technically want, that's where, in my opinion, the Reaper should have been an attempt to bring back group synergy or group building. You want the healer, you want the rogue, you want or the
Yeah,
trap guy, you
'cause
want
that's what
the
makes it so much
tank
fun.
DPS. Right, exactly. Unfortunately, it's just these overpowered TR solo builds, and they often just carry. You one of them alone could carry you through R8, but when you get 5 or 6 of them in a party together, then they just rip through it like it's nothing. And
Yeah,
if you die, if you're just like the lone pug that joined, like that's how I got introduced to Reaper too, was joining pugs. I didn't even know what was going on. Like, well, what is this Reaper? Because when I came back to the game after that break I was on, and it was just you die and they put your soul stone in your pocket and run the rest of the dungeon with you. It's like, well, dude, I'm not here to watch you play. You know what I mean? Like I'm
yeah,
trying to have my own fun right now. So
yeah,
that was very much to me, and I didn't held it really against the player, I held it against the developers, like whoever they were at the
yeah.
time. I forget if it was
Yeah,
still
which
fine.
unfortunately they could have done things that fixed it, but they just added fuel to the fire. Like they added like Inquisitive, which is like that really stupid dual wield crossbow build that literally is just a tree. Like it shouldn't be like your excuse to be able to get through your druid lives or something like that.
Right. Yeah, it is. It is still, I think, very much kind of a handicap build. I remember when it first came out, the moment I have a friend, his name is Mark as well, and he's basically a genius. I mean, the guy has a PhD in um, um I can't even think,
Molecular
mechanical
chemistry.
engineering.
Okay. Oh
No,
yeah,
I mean,
he's
I
a
mean, this
genius.
is the type of person. This guy, he's the kind of person who can teach himself a new language or a completely new field of like expertise, right?
Yeah.
Programming, you name it. He's taught himself all this stuff. But anyway, he was sort of like my go-to guy for builds for a while. That helped me like understand my dumbass barbarian brain. 8 intelligence, like understand all these things I'm looking at. And he
Sorry to
took
cut
one
you
look
off
at
just for 1 second, but I just watched
yeah.
this interview with Brandon Fraser and Adam Sandler, actors on actors, and Brandon
Oh
Fraser
yeah.
talking about when he did George of the Jungle, he had to go on this like no carb diet, and
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
affected his brain function in a way where he's talking this one funny story about being like he suddenly turned into a barbarian. He was trying to get money from an ATM and he couldn't remember because his brain was
Yeah.
like fragging from the lack of carbs, and he's just like banging on the ATM trying to get to work. It's like,
It's just
ah!
just getting into the role, getting into the character.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's what it's like for me sometimes. I don't know. I got plenty of carbs these days, so maybe that's why I need to get less carbs going. I'll be a better barbarian. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
um the hell was I talking about? Oh yeah, so when Inquisitive came out, my friend took one look at that and boom, right away he just made this like and it's like actually one of like a hardcore like some like nowadays it's a build that other people put on their streams and their videos, like even
Mhm,
Streamtron and stuff like that. And we were just ripping through. I was just soloing R4 right off the bat with this build. And I didn't have all the TRG gear that I had back then because it was
mhm.
just too powerful. You know, yeah. I think another problem too with Reaper is that they make money off of it. I mean, they're Reaper XP pots and other bullshit that they incentivize people to spend money in the
Oh,
store
oh
on.
yeah. Maybe. I mean, there's
I definitely know people that buy that shit every life. They spend money on that crap.
there are, but I know that there was also like even beforehand there were just like people that would just be like, yeah, I don't care. I'm just gonna go buy like an XP pot and like 30, soul cakes or whatever. That was always there. I think
Mhm.
um, there was definitely like for me, I kind of saw this like shittiness in Reaper where people were like, well, how can I do this and not like have to spend money too? Which I think kind of incentivized them to restructure how they can make like how they can continue an income flow because
I think they
people
should.
were
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Go ahead.
because people were like because for me like I didn't really see people cheating as much until Reaper came out. Then that's when people were like really starting to cheat.
Definitely. Yeah. No, I
When
agree.
people
Yeah,
were
because like you
starting
said,
to,
that yeah, there wasn't really an incentive to. I mean, there was always the incentive to finish a quest faster,
yeah,
right?
definitely.
But I mean, yeah, I think hardcore is a really good idea. I think it's a wonderful and it's such an excellent game for hardcore
Oh, it's
play
perfect for
style.
it. Yeah.
I wish though, I hope they find a way to incorporate it with main servers. Although I doubt they will because again, they probably make so much money off the store through hardcore. But it would be nice if it didn't split up the community, the game player base every time there's a hardcore season. And now they're doing what, 2 or 3 a year. So it's like
Oh
two,
yeah.
it's like there's like seasons of the year, seasons of gameplay where your main server just gets drained. I really can't stand that. I hope
Yeah,
they
and
change.
then it's kind of like trying to play High Reaper. Like it spikes the lag and just causes the connection to crash so much more.
Yeah.
Um, and it's like there are even like certain times of the season because I live like where I live in Maine. It just has such just horrendous like internet and Wi-Fi connection. It's infamously bad. It's
Mm.
like so bad. There's only like two. It's like Xfinity and there's something else, and it's not even that great. And your Wi-Fi is just shit, complete shit. Um, Luckily, it's not as bad as it used to be, but like still, it's just like it causes. Like I know that there's
I
people
remember it
that
used to
probably
drop a
can't
lot.
play. Yeah,
Yeah,
just because of like
I do
how bad
remember that.
that is. I think it would be interesting to yeah, and like now that you say that with hardcore, I think it would be kind of interesting if there was some sort of like permadeath system or setup. Like you could create like for like a quest, there's like a hardcore mode. Like if
Right.
one person
That's what I was
dies,
thinking.
like you fail the quest, like in your group, or you create a specific player that it's like if you die, they permanently die, or you get rejected all the way back to level one, and everyone else in your
I think that's what I was thinking was you just have just like a lot of games when you create the character, you choose for it to be hardcore or not. So if you create a hardcore character on Sarlona, for example, then you can only play with other hardcore characters, form groups with only other hardcore players. And then when you do a dungeon, it has to be a well, the dungeon doesn't have to change. You just have a hardcore character. And I even think there's a way. I mean, what's really the drawback? What's really the loss if you let a hardcore player play with a regular softcore player, right? And
Yeah.
because the first argument is like, oh, well, that's so cheap. The hardcore character will just get carried through. It's like, yeah, probably, most likely, that's going to happen a lot. But at the same time, what's the loss to the company? What's really the
Yeah.
loss? You know what I'm saying? Like, why even have a morality around that or a concept that there should be some penalty to the player? I
Yeah,
think they should
no,
just let it go,
because
just have fun with it, and then try to monetize it afterwards
yeah, I mean,
instead of
there's
trying to
going to
get
be
upfront.
like you're always going to have people that will cheat. Like there's always going to be those people who play that want to cheat, and they're going to be like, oh well, because like even if like what we were just saying, you mix together hardcore and regular, like if that were to happen theoretically, there's going to be groups of people that would cheat and take advantage of that,
Yeah, I
and
mean, I guess, yeah.
they would. And they just want to do that so they can go on their Discord group and like brag about how many lives they have on their hardcore character. But
Well, a
then,
strong argument is that they would, to get the hardcore rewards, you would just have your softcore friends, like, carry you through the quest or to 20 or to 30. And that's why it's just like, for me, it's just it's just a sentiment. Like, I don't care if they did or didn't. They probably should just have hardcore characters with hardcore characters and be done with it.
yeah. But then, like, there'd be people like you and I who'd probably just be like, "Hey, you want to see if like we could get like a Wednesday group going?"
Yeah, we used
Yeah.
to do that. We had so it was a group I started, again, it's like 10 plus years ago. It was called Midnight Metal because it was all these guys that were in the guild that were like me at the time. We're third shifters, right? So we
Hmm.
get on, if we are, or yeah, so we're like third shifters. So if we didn't work that night, we'd be gaming, right? And it was called Midnight Metal because everyone had to be a Warforged, and it was a hardcore playthrough, like through an honor system, right? So
Yeah.
if someone died, they couldn't bring that character back. They had to bring a new character in, or way to start over, stuff like that.
Hmm.
So it was pretty fun. It lasted, I don't know, maybe a month, and we played like 6 or 7 times. But there were back then that was a thing. We weren't the first to do that, I don't think. And there were because technically the first people to do that, at least on Sarlona, were role players. Because there used to
Yeah.
be role playing guilds and role playing only groups, and that's why there's a role playing tag that you never see. I turn it on actually every now and then just to fuck with people, and they're like, "What the fuck is that?" Like new players be like, "What is that thing on your head?" It's like, "I'm sorry, but I don't want to speak out of character. You got to talk to me in character." And then they respond because they probably don't even know what the hell I'm talking about. But
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. I
so
used
what
to have.
about
Yeah. I
yeah?
used to have a
Go
role
ahead.
play joke after like Vistani came out because I basically just play a favored soul for like a year or two. And
Oh yeah,
I,
they're fun.
yeah. And so on Safety Steve, I always had Vol as my patron. So everybody's a slave to Vol. And because I'm a priest of Vol, everybody's a slave to me. So I just go around and like make an ass out of myself and call everybody a slave. And people would listen and they'd be like, ah, all right, we'll do what you say.
Dude. I pissed off this lady once. I think we were doing like Tempest Spine or something, and we're all just bored and talking. And someone brought up like the idea of like a pet, there's no strong pet builds, and I'm like, well, that's just that's D&D. You can't really make a summoner of any note. You know what I mean? Like that's just the role that summon monsters and animals play. They're just sort of they're just there for like attrition. You know what I mean? They're like HP softeners. And anyway, we got into it later, and then she oh yeah, because she was playing a rogue or a ranger melee, and I'm like every cleric is a pet class, and she's like, what are you talking about? I was like, well, that's how I look at it when I play a cleric. Like all the members of my group are my summons. I'm just healing them to kill shit for them. She did not like that.
That's so funny. Yeah, that's funny. Oh my god, I just remembered this one thing. Like, I think it was when you and I started playing and we were talking on Discord. You had this thing where you just hated halflings as a barbarian.
I can't stand halflings. It's not a prejudice towards short people either. I fucking hate halflings. Thanks to Dragonlance. But go ahead.
Oh yeah, because of the dragon. Yeah, and it's just so funny, like hearing you in character. Like your voice would just, you're already really deep, macho voice gets even deeper, and you're like, I just want to hear their skulls crash. Like
Yeah,
hearing you
I
just go
can't
like
stand that shit, man.
full rage, like, ah, I have to fucking kill them. I just remembered that.
That was a
That
joke
was,
when the
yeah,
burning
yeah,
that one time. That
yeah.
was a joke. So Manox, the original Manox is a Warforged barbarian. And I had characters before that, but that was the character that like got me known on the server, and our guild was really big back then, you know?
Hmm.
And then there was like competitions between like best players on the server for like by class and stuff, and it was just kind of like a friendly thing. Like you would meet people from other guilds and be like, oh, it's that barbarian from Skull
Wherever.
Riders. It's like, yeah, well, here's the barbarian from the Burning Hand, right? And then if we were in a group, it was like who could get the most smashables and the most kills, right? So it was
Uh-huh.
almost always me. Like that was my thing. Like I wanted to be the best like barbarian on the server, right?
Yeah.
And I had a thing where if I ever saw a rust monster, I ran away. So I never fought rust monsters because they were like that was like my greatest his nightmare, right? Like
Is that
Manox's
where?
only fear is
Yeah.
rust monsters. So, you know, we'd be doing Tempest Spine or whatever, and I would just run away from them. And I would just run circles and I wouldn't fight, would never swing at a rust monster. And the other
That's
thing
my
was
favorite.
halfling.
Yeah.
It was
That's
the
my
opposite for
favorite like
halflings.
character quirk is like
Yeah.
it's something that's your greatest fear and like they keep running into it.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite things is like, can you come up with a character? Yeah. That'd be a fun live stream. Safety Steven Mannix in character.
We should do it, man. I actually I want to start streaming DDO. I don't know why I've never done it. I'm actually sad that I wasn't. I'm so dumb because when YouTube first became a thing, I am, dude. I'm always late to the game on everything. And when YouTube first became a thing, I actually made some gaming videos, and they had hundreds of thousands of views. But I didn't think anything of that. To me, that was just just a marvel. I was just, oh, that's cool. You know, the people from around the world watch my video, big deal. Because there was no revenue back then, there was no advertising on YouTube or any of that, and I never thought I could monetize that or do anything with it. It was just, oh, cool, a bunch of people watch my video,
Well, it's
but
probably
I didn't realize
wasn't
I
it?
was at the beginning, of streaming technically.
Yeah. Well, wasn't that like before the YouTube started monetizing people?
That's
If
what I'm saying. It was before
yeah,
that, yeah,
yeah,
way before. It was like I said in the beginning. I have a video from I have 2 or 3 videos I made within the first year that YouTube went live.
yeah.
Um, because I remember before that, not to get on like a YouTube tangent here, but before YouTube, we used to I remember sitting in front of the computer with my brother, and we were looking for music videos. We thought that was the coolest thing on the internet at the time, was being able to find like websites that had music videos that we could go and watch our favorite bands and shit like that. Because you couldn't do that, right? You'd hope MTV would play something that wasn't shit, but you could be watching for hours before that happened.
Oh
You
yeah.
know?
Be like, ah, oh, great. Now I need to get to this other band I hate. Oh, great. Now they're gonna play this fucking
Yeah,
video. Yeah,
yeah. You had to
I
like
remember that
wade
when
through it.
my friend first introduced me to, in like I think it was like the summer of '07. First introduced me to YouTube. I was like at that point trying to look up like every live performance of or like all the good shows of like whatever this band or that band or interviews. That was one of the first things I started looking up. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of late to the whole pagan game, and I'm like interviewing. I'm interview. I have the Skaldic archive, and I just have. It's just me and like typically two other people that are like way smarter than me, and I'm just kind of like an idiot that may have like picked up a book from Barnes and Noble, and people are loving it right now.
Mm.
I don't know. Maybe we could do a live stream that people enjoy. Mannix the
I want to.
Barbarian
Yeah,
and
I want to. I think that'd be
Safety
fun. Why
Steve.
not?
Yeah. Safety
I think
Steve
that'd be
the
funny.
cleric that firmly believes he can enslave the whole world in the name of Vol.
I think we should do like we should try. Maybe we should start with like a hardcore stream, and we always do like a duo, and just I mean, if somebody dies, we restart. So then we just see like which class duo ends up being like goes the furthest kind of
Goes
thing.
the furthest. So
Yeah.
we should come up with like the worst characters possible. Like you create
No, no, no. I mean,
a
we should. Oh, no, I don't want to fucking waste my time. Like, I want to actually accomplish something.
actually
You
accomplish it.
know.
All right, cool.
The only thing I'll say is this. The only thing I'll say is this. Like, what would be interesting to me is if I choose a build for you to play and you choose a build for me to play. As long as you're not
Okay.
fucking trolling me, then I'm down.
Okay.
Like, you can
All right.
challenge, like we can challenge each other, but not like I'll go play a halfling druid tank or something like that. I was like, no, I'm not. I'm not gonna fucking do that.
All right. So we come up with legitimate builds for each other.
Yeah, like something we think would be interesting or something we think like for me, I know it would be when I give people builds, it's usually I try to think of something I think they haven't played yet and I'll ask them a bunch of questions. And if they haven't played something yet that I think they'll like or that maybe they'll find fun, I'll have them try it out.
All right.
See what they
All
think,
right.
that kind of stuff.
All right.
Or give them a new spin on something they love. Like if they love cleric, I was like, "Well, did you ever try like a single weapon, fighting like cleric of all?" Like that was my one of my favorite cleric builds I did, even though it wasn't like end game worthy or whatever.
Uh-huh.
But
I think the
stuff like that.
only thing I haven't done yet with cleric is probably like a wizard is some kind of wizard cleric mix. I think that's probably the one
Yeah,
thing.
I'm actually trying. Believe it or not, so I've been rolling a lot of clerics on, or I should say, morning lords for hardcore. For whatever reason, that became like my favorite class to play on hardcore. So I'm on my third or fourth like morning lord for hardcore, and every time I choose a different domain. So I was pretty surprised with lightning. That was really good, especially, but it was more of like a late bloomer. Like it was really good in late heroics. But what's really good in early heroics so far is magic. Um, you get, I think, at level 5 or level 6. I think it's level 5. When do you get your second or your first like major SLA? I think it's level. I don't. I can't remember. So in for magic domain, it's basically like a chain missile with an explosion effect on it.
Oh
So
yeah.
it turns out if you pump kinetic lore and impulse into it right off the bat, which is easy to find, like at level 2,
Uh-huh.
it shreds. You just let all the kobolds like get into a gaggle and one shot them all. And
Yeah.
the weird thing is that the secondary and tertiary targets take more damage than the main target. I don't know why. That's just how that spell works. And it usually clears everything around your main target. So what I do is I just pick the weakest one in the bunch and then just nuke them all. And then by the time you get Holy Smite on a cleric, that's, you just
Yeah.
steamroll.
Smite
So
you in the name of my God.
yeah, they
Got them
changed
all
too
out.
the way Divine Disciple works. I haven't this it's the first time I'm playing it now is on hardcore since the major change. And I like it for hardcore especially because I can spend 23 AP in Divine Disciple and
Mhm.
then I have all the DPS I need for 1 to 20. I can go now. All the rest of my AP can go in defense or utility, and that's why I like Morning Lord because Turn Undead is actually really powerful, right? In heroics, especially if you're only playing on elite, which is all mainly how I play it. So it turned out to be a really strong character
Okay.
overall.
Okay.
What's your favorite hardcore build,
Ooh, that's a great question.
or at least right now?
Uh, that's a combination of things. I've probably because I'm like a sucker for Warlock. I always enjoy creating a blasting character for with
Yeah,
Warlock. Um, and I will always enjoy creating like some kind of undead Eldritch Knight build.
yeah,
Um, just because it's so self sufficient and it's a character that just can just jump right into any group. Like I can hop into a
mm,
group with it and have little to no problems. Those have been my two primary builds, and just because I love melee so much, this is the one build that somehow I always manage to get myself killed the most with, Bastard Sword Artificer.
dude. I know that is one of my favorite builds thematically because I love Bastard Sword. That's my favorite like weapon in D
Yeah,
and D. And yeah, for whatever it should be awesome, and it kind of is, but it should be stronger than it is. I
yeah.
feel
It's
because I
kind of
mean, technically,
weird
Artificer has a
how
whole tree
they
based on it.
Yeah, and it's also kind of weird how this is probably like my biggest criticism with the way that the game's set up is how weak the melee characters are because melee is so much more complicated than spell casting or ranged combat, and yet for some reason it's like when you're a melee character, you have a choice. You either are a tank or you're a damage character. And for some reason, like you have to pay the consequence of picking damage over survivability, and yet like you will never compete with
No, it
the
is
other.
true. Yeah, I mean, there is no doubt that late game melee, you absolutely have to have it for boss killing, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's in my opinion, that's the main role of melee in DDO is boss DPS. So there, it has its role, but you're right. Like no other archetype or playstyle in the game, melee is the one that suffers the most. I mean, just by example, when I do a druid life, I love playing druid because I love doing like a lightning based druid, right? And I mix it up. I don't just do lightning and cold. I usually do like lightning, cold, poison. So I love the blighted staff and stuff like that. It turns out to
Okay.
be a really powerful build. Like I can solo R6, R8 on my druid when I get him like running if I choose to gear him, let's say, right? And just the example I want to give is I can go into, let's say I'll solo um the Demon Queen on R1 2 levels early, just because on Manox is overpumped with TRs, right? If I
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
he is. He's just juiced. So I'll go in. I always do it two levels early. If I go in with a melee build, I'll struggle. Sometimes it'll take me 30 minutes to complete it, and I'll need all these resources. I'll need scrolls or potions, wands, whatever I can to like struggle through it. If I go in with the druid, I have literally completed it in seconds. I have done that raid in literally
yeah,
seconds, like under 3 minutes in total. Like the
yeah,
time to kill her, I killed her once with all my dots crit on her. And I think she's weak to cold,
yeah,
that's like the
yeah.
strong damage against
Is
her.
that
Just took her out
is that
instantly.
before or after the update with the elemental forms?
Oh, I mean, that's like, like in the last year I've done that. Like
Yeah,
a
the
year
last.
ago,
Okay,
I
yeah. So
played a
that was
druid.
after they
Yeah.
updated it. Yeah,
Yeah.
'cause I haven't played a druid in a while. Like when they first changed it, I don't know how. Like I haven't tested it to see how good it is, but like 3 bard 17 druid is I've found really fun when that first dropped.
Mm.
Um, Especially with like some of the weapons like the magmatic reaver. Um, uh, Slight like you have a slight speed increase, but definitely like you can if you build it correctly, you can do a lot of damage in melee. If you're
Yeah, I mean,
doing
that's a beautiful
the
thing
weapon
about druid
control.
too. For the most part, you can build them however you want, and they're still very functional even in late game.
Yeah.
They can
So
still serve a role. And
now I
that's
want to try
the
that.
strong thing about casters
Maybe I
in
should play
general.
a druid for our hardcore.
Druid. So yes, well, here's the thing: Druid on hardcore is tough, and I rarely see druids. And on top of that, rarely see a good druid player when I do see a druid on a hardcore, and that's because druids early are actually pretty rough. Even as a caster, you don't.
Oh yeah,
It's the only caster, in my opinion, that you can't start the game as a spell slinger because you have very low SP, you have very low damaging spells, and you just can't you don't have anything low hanging in your tree, your caster tree that's really going to
yeah,
pump up your damage. So even as a caster, even on my main, I always start. I take casting feats, but I'm using Winter Wolf form up until like level 12 or whatever before I switch over to full
yeah, yeah.
It's pretty late.
That was and that definitely sucked too. Playing that and early on. Because I remember it just like turned into like I think I had to do like a lesser TR at one point, or 2 lesser TRs when I did that life because I started out and I was a high elf and or not a high elf, a wood elf, and it wasn't until like 13th level I think, and everything had to like turn like I had to turn everything into a weapon build just because my casting just couldn't keep me alive. And you're not
Yeah.
geared for the things that you go up against because when you're early on, you do have to fight a lot of undead and things that are highly resistant or immune to like cold and electricity.
That said, though, I will say I think if you're going to do Druid on hardcore, go Bear first and take
Yeah,
Flame Blade. And Flame Blade is super strong, especially for elite. You're just gonna like, I mean, from one, I'd say all your twos, threes, and fours are gonna be easy mode, just by using Flame Blade.
all right. I think
You know,
that was probably my mistake then. So Flame Blade.
Flame Blade is super strong early because you get all that extra damage for free. I mean, extra elemental damage at level 1. You can't beat that. I mean, and it stacks with um or it doesn't stack, but having high wisdom because it uses your wisdom to hit and damage.
Yeah, with
So
Falconer.
that along with your spell casting is going to make you. It's actually a really strong. I think that's the best way actually to do a hardcore or any druid early game. Again, like I said, I I use animal forms and DPS melee with a mix of casting before I go full caster.
Yeah.
And it's usually late heroics when I go full caster.
All
because
right.
I'm trying to get the elemental forms.
All right. Now
So
I'm like,
try that. That's what would you add to TDO? What have you always wanted that they just never added? It could be a module, it could be a class, it could be a prestige or
module
something, a
class
weapon type,
prestige.
maybe a monster.
Hmm. I would add things to the game where um, people who could not reincarnate or didn't want to reincarnate, like didn't want to go on the TR grind, um, there would be potential quests or something added to where there could be given like or provided some kind of leverage where they're not going to be competing with the people who went through all the trials and tribulations of um,
Yeah. Boy,
but
that's another
like
thing.
they could
Yeah.
keep up potentially. Like if you have
Yeah.
some friends that are really good at the game and like you don't have a lot of time, like me as an example, like right now I don't have the kind of time I used to where like I could just drop like 6 hours a day into DDO. um, but if you like, I would add something like that as something that's end game and could keep people busy. I would absolutely love some sort of like randomized dungeon system. Like it
Mm.
produces an objective or like multiple phases depending on what difficulty, and you choose like the length of the quest. Like you can just pick like a short solo quest just to keep yourself busy, or you can do like a long solo quest, or you can even just set it up for a raid like challenge. Um, I don't really know like what would be an appropriate award reward system. Maybe something kind of like how the Isle of Dreadgear setup, where you can collect items, but you can also craft and decide like what's going to be in it, like what's going to be in this artifact,
Ooh, I
what's going
like that.
to
I like that. In fact, it would be interesting if crafting was reformed completely around that kind of like random dungeon play or just like player made dungeon. That way
yeah.
the crafting system is the reward. Yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah, because I think what happens with something like DDO, the game becomes too predictable, and so like what I found with soloing is even though it's like really nice to have a strong enough character where through majority of the game almost at the point to where like almost all of the game I can just pretty much play it on Reaper by myself. Even though that's also because I'm playing a wizard character, which is pretty damn powerful right now, especially after the Eldritch Knight tree being redone. But I, the thing is like the game, like the game, like we've all ran Giant Hold, Heroic, and Epic like 10,000 times. You've all ran, but I think that randomized setup, that idea of like I'm going to go into a quest that I've never done and we're probably going to play once this one time, and I have no clue what it's going to be or the objective on Reaper 3 or on hard by myself or with two people. I think that is something that is just going to throw in a kind of excitement that I think is why hardcore has remained is going to remain so special, because it's like, oh well, you don't really know what's going to happen. You don't know if like the game's going to let
You're
you
all on the
go.
same playing field too, even though I mean, it's even what I like too about hardcore is that obviously there's a lot of veteran players in DDO. That's I think probably most players have been playing for a while.
Yeah,
And but you can see like on hardcore when there's a good player in the group, for example, the difference that it makes. And it's not gear, it's their knowledge of the game, their build, and how well they play it. And that's much more interesting than even I don't feel like it's pretty arbitrary to me when I walk into a quest and I carry the group, but I don't really feel it's mostly my skill. It's my many TRs. I mean, my
yeah,
God, Manox is like over, I think he's up to like over 120 TRs at this point. He's close to being maxed. And it's like at that point, I could probably just hold W through a whole quest, just get an aura up, and everything would be nuked.
yeah.
So
But I
no, it's a
yeah,
really good point that you made earlier. And something I've thought about many times is how the game really isn't new player friendly at all. Mainly
it's
because
not.
when you walk in, yeah, I mean, if you start DDO right now, there's a good chance you'll love it, but you got to really give it a chance because, like you said, you walk into some pickup group,
Yeah, you're gonna get wrecked.
and well, you're just gonna get carried, which I think is
Yeah,
even worse. I don't
yeah,
learn anything. I'm not having fun. I'm not playing.
yeah. That's what,
Someone else
and
is
that's,
doing
yeah,
all
and
the
that's
work
what
for
happened
me.
to me kind of at first. Like I was with this one group that was just, um, like the guild I'm still in, the Shadow Government. It used to be the Crimson Permanent Assurance. Um, like I was literally just getting yeah, a lot of bunch of
I had that.
poison.
That's funny. That's weird. When did that guild start? Because I literally wanted to start a guild called that, the Monty Python
I think
fan.
it
Yeah.
was. It must have been like 2013, I think, because that's when I think they all started playing. But there's only
Hmm.
like me and I don't even know if like the guild is still running
I
it.
remember talking to someone like years ago in DDO about starting a guild called that. I wonder if I
That's
was
funny.
talking to your guild leader.
Like
Didn't
a
know it.
former guild could have been.
Yeah.
I don't know. Was anyone named Rohangar or Abu Khan?
Yeah, yeah, the Rohangar guy sounds really familiar. That
Yeah,
sounds really
because
familiar.
he used to play a lot, and Rohangar was really, really good.
That name's very familiar.
He
Yeah.
was he
And
was
I'm
the
terrible with names,
first.
so
He was the first in our group to start reincarnating on one character, and then, and I feel like this is just like such. I want to call this veteran syndrome. Um,
mm,
so like he kept like he was the first, and I don't know how many months, but he did. He was the first to get heroic completionist. And he was like the first out of all of us to reincarnate. Like everybody just had like a couple of characters, and um, I just like chose to reincarnate Safety Steve because like his first life was such a disaster. I'm like, I need to play something that at least can get like one kill or can last more than 5 minutes.
right,
And
yeah.
so like that's how I ended up making, which I feel as though I would have been more survivable. Like I would have been survivable if I just took the time just to tinker with it more. But I just went Eldritch Knight instead of trying to be the caster. But I went a Warlock, and after Rohangar became heroic completionist, that's when racials were out, and he was at that point like just interested in just getting racial completionist. So all he did was just play Warlock all the time because it was like the most powerful class, and and then afterwards, because he just kept playing the same quests the same way over and over again, he quit. He's like, "Oh, the game's so boring," and we were like, "Dude, come on! Why don't you keep playing? What it's like? Why don't you just run with us? Like, and just play whatever you want? Like then we'll be a group." And he just got so caught up with like reincarnating and being really powerful, it became like really droll for him, and he left
Mm,
with that. And it was like, "Oh, come on, man, really?" Um, So I mean, like I keep. I mean, like right now I just stick with Wizard just because it's like I know it. I have fun with it. There's a variety I can pick from. Like I can probably alter my build every. Well, I mean, I do alter my build every life. There's always something I'm mucking around with, which keeps it fun. Um, but like I can play with a group or just play by myself. And I mean, I think like people just keep getting so caught up too. But yeah, I mean, like you have to really kind of struggle through it. And for me, it wasn't until the Discord group Deep Reap, which at the time they had a live stream when they started, called like the Deep Reap live stream. And it wasn't until like I started getting like dragged around by all these like really crazy good players, and I was asking them questions like while I was in somebody's pocket. I don't know why. Like I'd be getting dragged around by some of them. I'd just get invited, and they'd be like, "Steve, join us." And I'd be like, "But this is a 30th level quest, and I'm level 12." And they'd be like, "Doesn't matter, just get in here now." And like while I was dead, I'd be like, "What's this? What's this? What's this? What are you
yeah.
guys doing?"